Welcome to this edition of the Locker Room Chat, brought to you by the Shanneman Sports Museum of Tacoma, Pierce County, and Rainier Asphalt and Concrete, the #1 asphalt and concrete repair contractor in the Tacoma and Seattle area. For quality workmanship and top-notch customer service, contact Rainier Asphalt at www.rainierasphalt.com and let them know you heard about them on the Locker Room Chat. I'm Carl Hoseth, your host today, and we are excited to have as our guest a man who needs no introduction if you are from Tacoma, Hall of Fame inductee at Wilson High School, class of 1974, Hall of Fame member at Pacific Lutheran University, and the only football player at PLU to have his jersey retired, John Zamberlin. John, it is great to see you. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
What an introduction. That's awesome. No, it's great to see you. I've known you for a long, long time. I haven't seen you for quite a while. I'm proud to see what you've done and where you've gone and where you are in your journey. But I'm excited to be back here and give a little bit back to the community where I grew up and where there's so many great memories.
Well, fantastic, John. And I think that's where I would like to start, is to have you talk a little bit about growing up in Tacoma. Maybe you can share what sports was like for you in the 60s and early 70s, what the youth sports programs were like here in Tacoma.
The youth sports programs where I grew up were awesome. I felt they're totally different than they are now. You have clubs, you have this, you have people flying everywhere. And I played for the North, excuse me, one second. I played for the North End Boys Club. And then once I got to junior high, it was junior high then, Truman Junior High, I played for the West End Braves. And I think we won a city championship. But baseball, I have great memories of summer times there. The only frustration sometimes were playing baseball in the spring. Some of the summer I'm getting rainouts, but we always had, like where I grew up, you always had a park to go to. I lived about a block away from Jane Clark Playfield, and during the summertime, they had park counselors that were there that ran the park, and they had different activities for you, from tetherball to basketball to one of my favorites was box hockey. Then you played baseball. We had a cement pool. So if you weren't playing an organized, you were at the park playing. So it was a great time, the experience I had. I was fortunate to go on and do some things athletically later in life. But I guess the point is that for me, I became a more well-rounded athlete because of all the different sports we played. And I always had somewhere to go to in the park. I mean, whether you were playing checkers or you were playing around the world in ping pong, or, you were doing something, you had somewhere to go, and there were people that were there the whole summer, which I don't know if they have anymore. And at the end of the summer, it culminated into you would go to Peck Field, if it's still called Peck Field, baseball field, and you would play all the parks would come, and you would play each other in a big competition for the bragging rights of who won in all the parks in the city. So it was a fun time. It was an interesting time. It was a competitive time, but it was a place that you felt safe, and it was like a home away from home that you were always at if you weren't playing an organized sport somewhere.
And you kind of talked a little bit about it, but you didn't talk a ton about football within that. You talked about a lot of other sports, and eventually you go to Wilson High School and you were all city in football. Talk about how competitive football was in Tacoma in the early 70s. At the end of the 70s, Mount Tahoma won back-to-back state championships, but there was a lot of great football played at that time too.
But when I was in junior high, here's one thing: is you knew you had boundaries. So I knew where I grew up, I was going to be a Wilson Ram. Somebody else grew up, knew they were going to be a Lincoln Egg, a Stadium Tiger, a Mount Tahoma T-Bird. Foss didn't come around until my senior year, I think it was. But So there was a lot of pride there. I remember days where before they had the state playoffs, they had the Turkey Bowl, and it was the two top teams in the city. They got together in Lincoln Bowl and they played, and everybody the Lincoln Bowl, the bowl would be packed. And you're a kid growing up, and you're the whole thing you're looking for. I mean, I'm going to play at Wilson High School. I'm going there. That's the school. And if they happen to be playing on Turkey Day, it was even that much better. And the whole city seemed like they came out for the game, and then after the game, then they went home for Thanksgiving dinner. And it was the same thing when they had with the grid ground, where all the city schools came and played like a quarter, and you worked your way through, and you had a champion in Lincoln Bowl. Of course, Lincoln Bowl was dirt when we played in high school, and Stadium Bowl was sand. Lincoln Bowl was, if it rained, the gravel would come up and tear you up more than any old AstroTurf. And if it was dry, it was like a dust bowl that you played on. But you know what? It was playing in Lincoln Bowl, or it was playing in Stadium High School. And it was like, hey, that was what it was all about as you were growing up, thinking about what you were going to do. I didn't, my playing was, I just had to shut that off. I'm sorry. But I guess I had more of a background of younger. I played more soccer from when I was a young age, all the way up until through my sophomore year in high school. And then I always played a lot of baseball. So football was late for me. I didn't start playing football until ninth grade at Truman Junior High School. And then went on to Wilson and played. And then my senior year, I had a knee injury. And back then in 73, orthopedics was not what it is now. And they didn't have scopes, and they didn't have a lot of the technology to determine what your injury was. And so I waited, I only was able to play in a few games. And then I had surgery my freshman year in that fall when I went to PLU. But the memories of growing up in where I grew up in the North End, and being a part of that Jane Clark, all the kids in the neighborhood at Jane Clark, and going on to Truman Junior High, and it was Sherman Elementary I went to. I'm not even sure. It's a different Sherman, I think, but I think it's still there.
There's a Sherman, yeah, and it looks nice too. It's brick, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than the Sherman I went to, I bet. But yeah, I just have nothing but fond memories. And there was always somebody in the community that gave back and coached the boys club, and coached your soccer team and the other things that you were doing. So yeah, it was. I enjoyed it. It's great memories to just sit and think about a little bit, because I haven't thought about it for a while, and share those with you.
Yeah. Well, one last question about your time when you were at Wilson. We were talking a little bit about this before we went on the air, but Wilson has a rich tradition of great athletes during your era, before you came, and definitely still has great athletes currently today. And Tacoma has always seemed to have great athletes. So I'm curious, who were some of the individuals you enjoyed competing with or against while you were in high school?
Well, I know before I was there, I'm trying to think, Carl, if it was ninth grade or my sophomore year, the football team at Wilson went over to Hawaii and played Punahou. Punahou is a private school over there, and there was a player that I played with in New England named Mosi Katupu that went on and played at USC before he was at New England. And Wilson smacked them like 38-6. I mean, we had some guys, and this was before the state playoffs, and so they would rank teams throughout the state. But yeah, I remember that they went. It was before my time, but I was getting close, and they went over there, and so I would always say to Mosi, "Now, who won that game, and what was the score of that game between Wilson and Bruno?" Because he was playing at that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were great. I mean, you look at it right now with the Olympics going on swimming. She was before my time, but Kay Hall, Olympic gold medalist. There was Olympic gold boxers. You have, like we were talking about, Daryl Robinson, who holds the state, not state, the nation fastest time in the 400 meters. There were people like I know, Clyde Warner, who was a linebacker with the Kansas City Chiefs before me. Dick Zakovich, who was played at the University of Washington at Wilson High School and was a legendary coach at Lakes, and then finished out his career at Lincoln High School. Um, Mike Balderson, who was a year older than me, that was a linebacker at the University of Washington, and then the NFL, and then became a head coach after being a police officer um, in Seattle, and then down in Oakland. That became the head coach at Bellarmine Prep High School for quite a long time. So yeah, there's great tradition, and I could sit there and try to think about them all, but there were some great people that came through there. And then you talk about right now, like I'm watching the swimming, and then you think back about okay, Coach Hanula, who was there, and how many was it? 24 straight state championships they won. And I think about the swimmers at my school that would be swimming before school, swim on their lunch break, swim after school. That had a great program going there, and it was dominant. And so yeah, there's rich tradition, and as well as other schools there also. But I guess I'm biased because that's where I went.
Yeah. Yeah, and as we were talking about too, that your jersey, your picture, and several other jerseys, the Darrell Robinson, his baton that he used in one of the relays, all of those are in those trophy cases in the gym, and it really is quite a shrine to all the incredible athletes that have gone through Wilson over the years.
And I think that a shout out goes to Dan Bissett, who was the principal, I believe, there at that time. And then that was his kind of vision or legacy to leave to the school before he retired. I want to say, oh gosh, I've got to talk about this person a little bit because he put his heart and soul in Wilson, Don Clegg. And I don't know if Coach Clegg is still teaching there. I know he's stepped down from the coaching, but
He is still teaching.
How many years of his life did he dedicate to Wilson High School and helping those young people there and making a difference in his life? And he's originally from down in this area. He talks fondly of Bora High School down here that was a legend. But yeah, he went up there. I don't know how many years he was the head football coach and had a positive impact on many, many people. And I got to see Coach Clegg coach when I was at Central Washington. He would bring the Wilson High School team over there for our summer camp, and how he cared about his players was something that was awesome.
So the next thing I'm hoping to talk with you about is your next phase where you ended up playing at PLU. How did you make that decision to attend PLU?
Well, I hate to say this. Remember, I told you I injured my knee my senior year in high school, so I didn't get to play in that many games. So I didn't really have any options. So I was going there. I was going to go to Big Bend Community College in Moses Lake and play baseball. And at the last minute, I changed and was going to go to PLU and play baseball because my brother had played baseball there. I hate to say this because when you go through when you're at a part of the PLU program, and I grew up in the North End, you have a dislike for the Loggers, the team over there on the other side of Tacoma. And that was a team that when I was in high school, I went out, introduced myself to the coach, and just said, hey, I'd be interested in playing. I hurt my knee, and I never heard anything back. And so I went to PLU to play baseball, and I had surgery on my knee my true freshman year in the fall. So I did not play football. So I came back and I played baseball. And for Jim Kittlesby, who was a dual threat as the SID, the Sports Information Director there at that time, and the baseball coach, a great person. I really enjoyed Coach Kittlesby, and then another time, Coach Anderson, Ed Anderson, who was a basketball coach too, became the head baseball coach and was an assistant baseball coach there. So I played for those guys, and I enjoyed it immensely. But one day I was watching a practice, and I thought to myself, I could play here. So my sole goal, I walked on, and my whole goal was, at that time, they had these old helmets with these ears that stuck out like that. My whole goal was not to get one of those helmets. That was my that was my goal. Okay, I got to do a good enough job not to get one of those helmets. That was step one in my goal, and I made the team. I didn't get one of those helmets, so I was pretty fired up about that. Uh, played played a little bit as that year, and we had an All-American linebacker in Steve Ridgway, somebody you know very well, that was a few years ahead of me. So my option was this: stand on the sideline and say I was a linebacker and not play, or go play defensive line and play and contribute. And so I played defensive line for a few years until Steve graduated, and then I moved to linebacker. And then things kind of took off from there. I was going to play linebacker. It was going into my junior year, and I was still playing. I played baseball the whole time there, and I was playing summer baseball, and I tore my knee up in June. And this was back before they had scopes, and so they had to open me up and operate on my meniscus, and they were unsure whether I was going to be able to come back. And I'm trying to remember his name. He was an exercise Gary. He had been the swim coach for a long time. Not Jim Johnson, Gary Chase. He was a teacher also there, instructor, and they had a ice kinetic machine, a leaper, it was called, and he would open it up so I could go up there and do a workout which was closed chain, so you're doing like squat work with it, but you could control the resistance, and that machine helped me come back stronger than I was before then. I wish I had a leaper now to work on, but that got me back, and I was able to play my junior year and senior year and won, and then end up going in the NFL. But yeah, that's kind of that's the road that I took, and it's amazing sometimes the journey that you don't think you're going to go into. Because I felt like I was going to play pro baseball because the New York Mets were in my house and told me they were going to draft me, and then I didn't get drafted. So I had another year of football, came back, and that's the direction I went and path.
Wow, that's really incredible. Even thinking I knew you played baseball, but I didn't know that was the main reason that you went there. And Frosty Westerman came to PLU in '72, so you were on some of those early teams that Frosty was really kind of building up to the national playoff teams that happened. What do you recall about Frosty as he was kind of starting the early groundwork for his program at PLU?
Well, it was to me. I think Frosty was a person that was way ahead of the time. I mean, Frosty was big into positive mental attitude. Frosty was big into building other people up, not comparing yourself to other people. Frosty was big into goal setting and mindset. All these things you talk about now, and a lot is buzzwords in education, where you talk about persistence and grit and what is grit and all these things. And we used to do a lot of, we'd set our goals, we'd turn in our goals every week, and it was like Frosty would say sometimes, a tough love program. I mean, he could get after you, but then he'd pat you on the back too. I was very fond of your dad, who was a defensive coordinator, Coach Hoseth, Paul, had a big impact on my life too. How he cared about the student athletes, have us over to his home, give us, your mom would make desserts that we would have. We'd watch game film of the opponent coming up. And I know that was special time for him too, to be able to share that with you guys and with his family and with us. So those were all special things and times. And a lot of things we did at PLU were It might not have anything to do with football. Like when we first reported, we do our testing, but then we'd go down to the ocean for breakaway, and we wouldn't do a lick about football. And it was just bonding and getting to know each other, and getting um, a caring about each other, and a understanding about where people of different backgrounds, maybe where they came from. So and then we came back and we started preseason and practice. So it was it was fun too. It was fun. I try to think about that with my team. Hey, we grind, and we after we had a couple of tough practices today and conditioning, but it's always trying to make sure that you remind it's still a game, and the things in life that they can learn. Frosty always talked about learning to enjoy the journey, not just the final destination, but all the things that it took to go in and be successful. Um, and they also talked about, as you go on these journeys, uh, and as a journey through his program, there are going to be different gems that you pick up, you put in your pocket, and there's going to be ones you put back down. It's amazing how many things that I learned there, and not only from Frosty, but from like your dad and other people, Jim Kittlesby and Dave Olson and people like that, that Sarah Officer, that made a difference in my life, that I still draw on today. And I still find myself teaching my players, or have used it as a parent. So it was a great time, awesome time. And Carl, here's an example. We guys I played with or went to school with, we're on a group chat, and people are on that group chat every night. So it's always going. And I'm coming up there, flying up there either Friday night when we finish football, or Saturday morning, and we're having a get together at Scott Logan's house. Um, that a bunch of guys are coming back to, that I haven't seen for a while. Um, it's I'm looking forward to it, because hey, we're getting older, and it's kind of like the band of brothers. It's people that you went through that time with, that you still share things with, or you still every night communicate with on a group chat. So it was a very special time in my life.
Well, I'm sure
That got kind of long-winded, didn't it?
No, that's great, and I'm sure that when you go to this reunion, there'll be a lot of stories that are told, and perhaps things that have to do with football, but and oftentimes maybe it doesn't have anything to do with football. But I do have a story that I need a confirmation whether it's true, because we heard it a number of times when I was there. We were told that there was one time when Frosty came into the locker room at halftime, and he was very upset with how the defense had played in the first half. And he was looking at several defensive players. They were sitting on the benches, and he said, "You're not tackling, and you're not tackling." And then he got to you, and allegedly he paused and then skipped to the next guy and then said, "And then you're not tackling, and you're not tackling." Is that true? Is that a true story?
There's a lot of stories that circulate about me there, that I can neither deny or confirm. But I don't know. I always try. Hey, you know what? Those stories turn into legend, and so we'll just let them rest and let them be.
All right, and then so here's one thing that I kind of I don't want to rewrite the record book, but I was looking on the PLU football website, and you were credited in 1977 with an amazing 11 interceptions, which is second all time, and you're the only linebacker that's on that top 10 list. However, when I was reading in the Hall of Fame write-up, it said that you were given credit for 10 interceptions in your career. And so that 77 season, which maybe was the time when you moved from the D line to the linebacker, or is there anything special that you remember about that year, about being such a dominant person in terms of picking off passes?
You brought that point up, Carl, because I see that, and I know I had 11, and I see getting credited with 10, like in my retirement, and I'm like, what happened to that last one, the other one? I don't know. I was just, I was, like I said, I was coming up at knee, and I worked extremely hard, and seems like I was, I took good drops, and I've always had good hands from playing baseball and other sports. And yeah, I think one game I had 3 picks in one game. I had two in one game for 2 touchdowns. It was just like it was great. It was a great year. It was like, and then I got zilch my senior year. I had one on my hand, like the very first game that we played, and I was tipping it, and it dropped, and I never got another pick after that. But yeah, it was something as you go through. I guess I just was in the right place at the right time, and like I said, I've always had pretty good hands as far as catching things and catching balls. So
We'll try to get that 10 bumped up in.
yeah, that you know, and that kind of sounds like I'm playing the big eye game, but I was 11. I knew that.
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to now move to when you're going to get drafted. So you get drafted in the 5th round by the New England Patriots. What was the pre-draft process like for you? Did you work out for a number of teams? Were you in communication with a bunch of different GMs and coaches? What was that like?
It was interesting. It wasn't like it is now. There wasn't the combine where they brought people to. So the scouts, as they still do, go out and look at things and look at people and evaluate and watch film. They started coming in after my junior year. And then we're coming in all that fall off season. They came in a little bit during the summer. They came in football season. They came in during the winter. And what they would do is they would usually there'd be I think it's called the Wonderlic, but it was a written test that you had to write, you had to take, and then they would put you through some drills. Yeah, it was an interesting process. I would run the 40 for them. I'd take pass drops. They'd see me move. They'd watch film. They'd talk to me. They'd interview me. It was funny. Some would be, oh, this guy's a little, from small school, whatever. Others were really attentive. I remember one scout was kind of to me, like I felt like he was just doing that, being there because to cover his tail, that he needed to be able to file a report if something happened or whatever. And in the meantime, the New York Jets had flown me down to Burbank, California, to an orthopedic surgeon to take a look at my knee and put me on a Cybex machine and test my knee out. And I remember the scout who was kind of just, like playing aloof, and saying, "Do you have any other questions?" I said, "Yeah. What's it mean if a team flew you down to Burbank, see a doctor and all that?" He goes, "Who did that?" I go, "The New York Jets." All of a sudden, he got a lot more interested in what was going on there. So some were very detailed. Marty Schottenheimer, who just passed away recently, who'd been a head coach, at Cleveland and Kansas City. At that point in time, he was a linebacker coach for, excuse me, the Detroit Lions. He came and worked me out. Other coaches. So it was pretty exciting. I didn't know where I stood. I just went out and competed. That's why I tell my kids now, you just go compete. You're coming up here from middle school, just compete, just like you did there. You're stepping up into college, go compete. It's a game. Go have fun. Do the best you can. Don't worry about it. I mean, that's kind of what I got to is I'm going to go out and compete, do the best I can, and let the chips fall where they may, and that's what I had and what I could control.
And that's kind of where I was hoping to lead you then when you go to training camp. So you get into New England, you're in training camp as a rookie. How different was that going from a small college atmosphere at PLU to now the NFL? What was that like?
Well, it was tough for me, and I got homesick. It was not anything like training camp was not anything. First of all, you go and clear across the country, so it's a different environment. And I tell my players too, change is hard. No matter where you go, change is hard, and it takes some getting used to and adapting. It was going clear across country, a different environment, and it was old school training camp. I mean, we were 2 days. It seemed forever. You're in full pads the whole time, hitting all the time. So it's a lot different than you see football. I see it on TV right now. They're going in just helmets. Hey, we never did that. It was always padded practice. We had some great players. John Hanna, Hall of Fame. Steve Nelson, linebacker. Raymond Clem, Mike Haynes, Hall of Fame. There were some great players there, but it was like once you started competing, it's just like what we talked about. You stepped up and you competed, and you let the chips fall where they may. So, yeah, playing in the NFL, I tell my players that NFL stands for not for long. It's a great experience. It was a great experience, but your body wears out. You get a step slower. You get an injury, but it's a great experience in your life. But even if you were able to do that in that position, it will end at some point in time. And very fortunately, like when I went to PLU, I got my education certification. I did my student teaching. I went through all that. So I never thought I would use it because after I played, I coached for college and universities for a long, long time. And I didn't think I was going to teach high school. But as we took a last move down here and things were changing, I found myself saying, okay, I don't want to put my kids through moving again. So I contacted PLU. I got my ed degree, found out what I need to do up in Olympia, got that reestablished, got everything moved down here, and had to take some classes to get a 3-year here first, and then took another course to get my my other certification up. But it was something at that point in the game, Carl. I didn't think I was going to end up in the classroom, but I was very fortunate that I had that background and I had done that, and I was able to get everything active. And who knows what the journey takes you? Hey, you might be next superintendent of Tacoma School District. Who knows? Right? You never know. Right?
Well,
the journey where it's going to take you.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segment to segue to what I'd like to talk with you in our next segment, kind of that transition to coaching and some of the things that you learned as a coach. But the last thing that I would like to say in this segment is kind of in that rookie year that you were talking about. I want to bring up that when you were a rookie in 1979, I wrote you a letter, and I think you're aware of that, or you still remember that. And I was concerned that Steve Nelson had gotten hurt in a preseason game, which you referenced, a veteran, and you wrote me back with a 15-cent stamp, and it became my show and tell item for my second grade. It might have been inspired by where we had a letter writing unit by my teacher, after I did the show and tell. But what I really wanted to thank you for is the vocabulary lesson, because your second line in the letter was, "Sorry, I haven't written sooner, but things get hectic around here." And I didn't know what hectic meant, but my mom told me it was a synonym for busy. And then I just thought that was a great way to start a letter. So for the next few years, all my letters to my grandparents, thank you cards after birthdays and Christmases started with, "Sorry, I haven't written sooner, but things are really hectic out here." So thank you for that vocabulary lesson, John.
Just the little things. You know what? That's a great point, though, because you don't know how you're going to affect people. And I'm sure I've had people that I have affected negatively. I've tried not to do that, but it's nice to hear that made a difference for you and how you approach things. I remember that letter. I remember getting that letter and writing you back, and so I think. Didn't remember you were second grade. I remember you were young, so that kind of dates me. But no, you know what? It was just the little things and taking that time meant a difference for you, and that's nice to hear. It makes you feel good, about some of the things that you've done for people, and it's not doesn't have to be big things.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you very much. And this concludes part one of our interview, but I invite you to please join us next time to hear more from John Zamberlin. On behalf of Rainier Asphalt and Concrete and the Shanneman Sports Museum of Tacoma Pierce County, I'm Carl Hoseth, and we thank you for joining us on another edition of the Locker Room Chat.